Hello, students. This is Neeta Biju. Welcome to another class of business studies. In our last class, we studied about the dimensions of business environment. In today's class, we're going to study about the economic environment in India. So, economic environment in India consists of various factors which have direct and indirect impact on the economic conditions of our country and industries. These factors include economic development of our country, economic structure of our country, economic policies of the government like industrial, monetary, fiscal policies of our country, economic planning such as 5 years plans, infrastructure of our country such as banks, transportation, communication, etc. So all these are the factors that consist of the economic environment of our country, which has a direct or indirect impact or influence on the performance of the company. So this is what is economic development of our country. So all these factors will somehow have great influence and impact on the working of the business. So economic development of our country, economic structure of our country, economic policies of the government, rules and regulations, that is monetary policies or fiscal policies, economic planning such as 5 years plans, infrastructure, banks, all these are the factors that comes under the economic environment of our country, and it is going to actually reflect on the working of our business. So before we study about the main aspect of this topic, first we should know the history of our country. So here in the year 1991, the economy of our country faced serious foreign exchange crisis. There was increase in government deficit and rising prices. So here what we should know, dear students, is before 1991 our economy was very down and very low. Our economy faced serious economic crisis. It may be in foreign exchange, it may be about the earnings of government, it may be about foreign currency, it may be about the economic development, it may be about the economic structure whatsoever. Our country faced serious problem in the economy. So that is why, as a part of reform, Indian government thought of taking certain steps and measures in order to come out of the economic crisis. So therefore, as a part of Indian reforms, the government of India announced a new industrial policy in July 1991, which helped the Indian economy to recover from its economic crisis. So we had a very bad situation where economy was very down before 1991. So government had to face more of deficit. Deficit means shortage of income or less income or no income at all, with rising prices, and even foreign exchange crisis such as low currency exchange price was low, and everywhere there was inflation. So this was economic crisis faced by our Indian economy in the before the year 1991. So government of India came up with certain measures in the year 1991, that was in the month of July, which helped the Indian economy to come up from the economic crisis. And this is what is known as economic reforms. The new policy adopted by Indian government includes the three very important aspects, that is also called as the LPG reforms. That is, first one is liberalization, the second one is privatization, and the third one is globalization. These are the three very important economic reform new policies adopted by Indian government in the year 1991 in the month of July, which is known as LPG reforms. That is, I repeat again, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So when we are talking about liberalization, liberalization means liberty. Liberty means freedom. So, liberalization is a policy adopted by the Indian government in the year 1991 as a new economic policy. Liberalization means giving freedom to the Indian industries from all unnecessary controls and restrictions. So there was lots and lots of controls and restrictions, too much of licensing system, too much of quota system, reservation system, too much of you can say restrictions were faced by our Indian economy from every sector. So here in the year 1991, when government introduced this economic policy liberalization, there was total freedom to the Indian industries because Indian industries were unable to grow and expand due to many restrictions from the government. So liberalization was the first step to recover India from the economic crisis. Liberalization makes the government give full freedom to the Indian industries from licensing and quota system, which in turn will help the Indian industries to grow. Therefore, growth in Indian industries will help in the development of our country. So, here the steps taken in liberalization policies are as follows. First one is abolishing licensing requirements. Second one is freedom in deciding the scale of business activities. The third one is removal of restrictions on the movement of goods and services. And the fourth one is freedom in fixing prices of goods and services. So the steps taken in liberalization policy is to abolish licensing requirements. Every industry need not seek license except the listed ones. Every industry need not go for licensing system. There was total freedom on the part of the industry or business to decide the scale, that is it. They can opt for small scale or medium scale or large scale industrial activities. Removal of restriction on the movement of goods and services. Of course, there was no much of control, no much of tariff and taxes laid down on the part of government for movement of goods from one place to another. Moreover, the fourth reform was the freedom in fixing prices of goods and services. First, there was lots of restrictions on the from the part of government on the industries on the policy making of prices. But here, after liberalization reform took place, there was total freedom in fixing prices of goods and services. It was left to the part of industry and business. So there was total freedom, and that freedom is what is called as liberalization, that is, less of restrictions and controls on trade and industrial activities. The next one is privatization. So, privatization is the second economic reform which aimed at giving great role to the private sectors and a reduced role to the public sectors. The new industrial policy of 1991 helped to convert the public sector enterprises into private sector enterprises, and this was done through disinvestment. Disinvestment means selling of shares of the public companies to the private sectors. This helped the private sectors to work more efficiently, and the loss making companies started earning huge profits. So basically, privatization means what the government did is nothing but helped the private sector to play a more important role in the Indian economy, in the business, trade, and industry, and lesser role was given to the public sector enterprises. After the industrial policy reform of 1991 took place. So this helped in the conversion of public sector enterprises into private sector enterprises because private sector enterprises were better in management, were efficient enough, they earned huge profits, and everything was well organized and systematic. So this privatization had one particular policy, that is what is called as disinvestment. So basically, disinvestment is nothing but selling of shares of the public sector enterprises to the private sector enterprises, which help the private sector enterprises to work more efficiently with more funds and resources, and all the sick units and all the loss making units started earning huge profits. So this is a very major part of recovery since 1991, because government thought of increasing the role of public sector and increasing the role of private sector and decreasing the role of public sector. So this is what is privatization all about. The next one is globalization. Globalization means the integration of the various economies of the world into a global economy. In other words, globalization refers to removing the trade boundaries that exist between countries. This policy removes the trade restrictions, which helps the Indian industries to grow in the foreign market by selling their products globally. So, globalization helps in the development of Indian industries and gain foreign currency. Globalization helped in removing the barriers, that is, the geographical or political gap between the countries. Therefore, through the policy of 1991, the government of India moved the country to the globalization pattern. So basically, globalization means one single market for the whole world. So after 1991, Indian government helped Indian market, Indian industries and business to reach globally. So there was no restrictions, there was no boundaries, there was no barriers, there was no trade barriers between countries, or there was no trade barriers or business barriers or restrictions between one country to another country. So here foreign currency earnings improved, there was increase in trade, foreign trade, import and export also increased. So globalization helped in removing all the gap, political gap, it may be geographical gap, it may be between the countries whatsoever. All these barriers were totally removed, and globalization was nothing but integrating all the economies of the world into one single globe or economy. That is what is called as global market, and that is what is called as world market. So there was no restriction as such. From whichever country you are, you could sell your goods or trade your goods and services without any restrictions, without any problems. So this was all about globalization as a global market. So these were the three very important economic policy reforms introduced by the government as LPG reforms, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization, as a step towards improving the Indian economy, to help our Indian economy to come out from the economic crisis. Government of India introduced in the month of July 1991 reforms called as the LPG. I repeat, liberalization, privatization and globalization. This is all for today's class, dear students. Thank you.